Last December, I had the joy and honor to go on a pilgrimage to Canterbury. I planned this journey well before I had even applied to be your priest, back when I was still a hospital chaplain and feeling exhausted and burnt out by that work. At that time, I was hoping to escape on a meaningful journey and get some renewal. But by the time it came to depart on this trip, there I was, just a few months into a brand new call here at St. Anthony's, feeling excited and nervous, thrilled, terrified, all at once. I had left hospital ministry, which is the ministry I had known for 6 years, to step into a brand new community. What a perfect time to go on pilgrimage. The cathedral in Canterbury is a huge and stunningly beautiful place of worship, and portions of it are over 1,000 years old. It's hard for us in the States to understand buildings that old. We just don't have any of them. Traditionally, Canterbury is the seat of the Anglican Communion, of which we Episcopalians are part. So at that time in my life, what a perfect time to go, and what a perfect destination to go on pilgrimage. Canterbury is famous for being the place where St. Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury at the time, was martyred in 1170. And after he died, people began to experience miraculous healings at Canterbury. Those stories spread, and soon Canterbury was a famous pilgrimage site and has remained so to this day. In fact, the famous book, The Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, of various pilgrims who are on their way to Canterbury to seek healing of some kind. But before we got to Canterbury, my group journeyed from London through the beautiful countryside of England, following what they called the Old Way, an ancient pilgrimage walking path that people still walk on to this day. We stopped at many historic churches, and the group even planned a little side trip to Stonehenge, which is not on the pilgrimage path. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see Stonehenge because that day I got a terrible food poisoning and had to stay behind in my hotel room and contemplate all of my life choices to lead me to that moment. The manager was kind enough to let me stay in the room, give me a late checkout because I was so sick I couldn't travel. And the group and I made a plan that if I was feeling better, I could hop on a train and catch up with the rest of them. So in between being terribly sick, I was just trying to rest as much as I could and sleep. Unfortunately, the manager forgot to tell the rest of the staff that he had given me permission to stay in my hotel room well past checkout. So about every hour or so, somebody called me to gently remind me I should leave, or knocked on the door to gently remind me I should leave. And every time I woke up feeling more and more miserable, I just said to remind them, talk to the manager, he said I could stay. I am sick. I promise you don't want to be in here. And I just wanted to sleep. Every time I woke up, I was feeling more and more grumpy about it. And so as we are reading today the Old Testament story of little Samuel, to wait over and over throughout the night, I find I have some sympathy for Eli. Hopefully Samuel didn't also have food poisoning on top of all of it. But when you are exhausted, there are fewer things more terrible than being woken up again and again. Poor Eli. But thankfully, I did begin to feel better that evening, so I was able to pack up my stuff, drag it to the train station, and a couple trains and a taxi later was able to catch up with the rest of the pilgrims. I was happy to see all of them, but I was also feeling kind of wrung out and weary from being sick and from the travel. It was just not at my best, just really wrung out. I went to sleep that night very grateful, but very tired. And thankfully, no one woke me up. That next day, I got up, still feeling a little sore, a little tired, a little grumpy. We set back out on the old way to Canterbury, and we were going to arrive there that night. But one of our final stops was this charming little town called Berwick, and their beautiful little country church, St. Michael and All Angels. This tiny little church was tucked away in this charming little wooded courtyard, but behind the church, the rolling green hills of the English countryside seemed to go on into the horizon. And inside this beautiful little church, the interior walls had been painted with this stunning Renaissance-style art, picturing the Annunciation to Mary, Christ enthroned among angels, the nativity scene, and many more. Their rector, Peter, gave us a tour and invited us to join the congregation for their midweek Eucharist service. Now, the church is very small, congregation-wise, so there was only a couple of them. The congregation mainly was us and Peter. And Father Peter was very welcoming, and he decided, without telling anybody, that in order to be a good host, he was going to invite our pilgrimage leader, Heather, who was also a minister, to lead us in Eucharist. So he said to her, "Heather, I would be more than happy if you would celebrate at the table." And Heather was surprised and said, "Oh, well, that's so kind of you, but I'm Presbyterian." And Father Peter just looked at her and said, "Oh, does that matter?" And she said, "Well, no, I guess it doesn't, but my tradition is not very liturgical." And at this point, she started to panic, and her eyes are darting around the church frantically, and then they fell on me. And with great relief, she announced, "But we do have an Anglican priest here in the group. Hilary is an Episcopal priest from Washington State." And all the heads in the church just swiveled around to look at me. And friends, let me assure you, in that moment, I did not look like a priest. I was sitting in the back row, probably still yawning from bone-weary exhaustion. I wasn't wearing a collar, but my pilgrimage uniform of old jeans, hiking boots, and this bright blue puffy parka, topped off with this purple headband to hide the mess that my hair had become in the rain of England. All my companions started murmuring my name in encouragement, "Hilary, Hilary," and I just froze like a deer in headlights. And Father Peter, without missing a beat, just smiled and gestured to the altar and said, "Hilary, would you like to preside? You are most welcome." And I managed to stammer something to the effect of, "Oh, I would be so honored, but I haven't prepared." And he said, "That's okay. Everything is already ready." And so I trudged after Peter and into the sacristy, looking very much like a tired pilgrim. I took off that bright blue parka and borrowed Father Peter's alb, his stole and chasuble, this purple of Advent, all of which were much too long for me. And I took the prayer book that he placed in my shaking hands, and I came back out looking and feeling like a priest again. All my nervousness and exhaustion just slid away. Of course, I had been a priest all along, but in that moment, I just became comfortable in myself. It was everything familiar: bread and wine, prayers and people. I was simply doing a task that God gave me when I answered the call I first felt as a child, just like little Samuel. It was exactly what I needed to renew my body and spirit to make the rest of the journey. And I can hardly describe to you how calm and happy and affirmed I felt, and the joy and peace that followed after that Eucharist service. Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. Here I am, Lord, send me. All of us, like Samuel, have a call. Some of us found our call in a life-changing aha moment. Others of us heard it in many small moments throughout our life, listening to that still small voice of the Holy Spirit. Some found their call in parenthood or a career or a cause. There are so many calls, as many as there are people. And if you are not sure to what or how God is calling you now at this point in your life, I will offer you Frederick Buechner's definition of vocation. The place God calls you is where your heart's deep gladness and the world's deep hunger overlap. The place God calls you is where your heart's deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. All of you have precious God-given gifts, skills, time, blessings, love, passion. And the world is so hungry for what God is calling you to give, what only you can give. And if you listen closely to your heart's great desire and the world's deepest need, you may indeed hear exactly what God needs you to hear, exactly what you need to hear from God. And even when you are sick or exhausted or grumpy, even when you do not feel prepared or worthy, the call is still yours. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to answer. So next time, my child, if you hear God calling, you shall be like Samuel, and you shall say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening."